Welcome to the Pride of Detroit Purrview, prideofdetroit.com, Pride of Detroit on Twitter, Pride of Detroit on Facebook, getting you through the week, getting you up for Thanksgiving, and getting ready for a short week, already coming off Indianapolis and heading back to Detroit for Thanksgiving. And this time around, I do not believe there is a moon pattern in play to really screw up anything. So I'm Chris Perfett, at Chris Perfett on Twitter, at Perfett on Blue Sky, host of the POD cast, and ready to bring you a special Purrview because I'd like to try to do this as much as possible, at least once a year. I haven't kept up with that, but he likes to talk about the Bears, and he likes to take a battle axe to the Bears. I think he's already shaking his head. No, this might be the worst of it, Jonas. Jona Knox from Fox Sports Radio, Two Pros and a Cup of Joe, and across Los Angeles TV and airwaves. How are we?
I'm good. I mean, listen, Bears aren't as good as the Lions, but I'm happy for you guys. You deserve it. Built that team the right way, and you're enjoying the fruits of your labor, so to speak.
Yeah. To be clear, too, because I know there's some Lions fans out there who's like, oh, I don't want to hear that from a Bears fan. Jonas, I like having on because your relationship with the Bears is what's a good single word to use?
Volatile.
Volatile? I was going to go with tortured, but I like that.
Yeah.
Could explode.
Yeah, I mean, it's look, growing up a Bears fan, you just sort of learn to expect the standard protocol when it comes to the Bears. You could insert any coach, you could insert any scheme, you could insert any era, you could insert any. This is an organization that no matter what through time has figured out the ability to identify, draft, groom, and build Hall of Fame caliber linebackers, and at the same time cannot figure it out on offense. It is mind-boggling, and that's where this season sort of spun off the rails. But as you've seen in recent weeks, maybe there's a glimmer of hope. Unfortunately, it's just not going to come in time for them to make a playoff run this year.
Yeah, I liked the draft pick of Caleb Williams. I think that's the right move. I know half the city tried talking themselves into Justin Fields. And to your point, starting the season, I don't think there was anything more predictable than a first week game where the Bears had 0 touchdowns on offense and somehow won over the Tennessee Titans. That felt like, okay, cool. It's some things change, some things stay the same forever.
And by the way, a game they should have lost. I mean, if we're being honest, and Bear fans can try and store that one in the back of their minds as often as they want, but they should have lost that game if not for an interception, a brutal one by Will Levis that turned into a pick six. That game's not even close. Tennessee controlled that football game. But again, to your point, he's a rookie. You expect sort of these issues to pop up with a rookie quarterback. It's just all the other stuff that has gone on since then that's been a little bit problematic for the organization.
I'm trying to figure out where to start with it. Let's start with the side of the last couple games because it's been a 5-game skid. And yeah, as you say, they've definitely looked like they've gotten themselves a little bit back together, but they've also had some terrifyingly bad luck in 2 straight divisional games. And I guess the push-pull for Lions fans looking at it is saying, okay, have they figured it out, or is this kind of a side looking at, as much as I look at the Packers and the Vikings, Jonas, the Packers have kind of gotten away with some screwy stuff lately. They got off scot-free on the 49ers not having any of their big opponents, and those have been their 2 wins since the Lions game. They hadn't looked right. They beat the Texans and Jaguars by 1 score. And then you have the Vikings game, which the Vikings, couldn't find the end zone against the Jacksonville Jaguars. They needed overtime and some real magic to really pull that out, and a debacle in overtime to really take everything that they needed to win that game. So there's on one hand, there's 2 places where the Bears could have won those games, but I think there's also a question of they are playing tough to their divisional opponents, or was this just sloppy stuff that they were kind of letting the Packers and Vikings get away with.
So when it comes to the losses, I watched the end of the Washington Commanders game with my wife and son. My son's 3 years old.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't know what the Bears winning looks like. Like there's no reference. Like he doesn't understand that. It's like people that were 95 who are like, are the Cubs ever going to win a World Series? Like I've already started him down the path of this is how this is going to go. But I wasn't like that douche on social media who like filmed his 3-year-old crying after they lost to the Packers and then put it online. Like he thought that was funny. Hey, let me air my 3 or 4-year-old out and show him crying to everybody because he roots for the Bears.
Let me just call a CPA real quick here. Hold on.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. So when it comes to the Bears, I'm watching that Washington game. And I'm seeing them somehow inexplicably, just like the Titans game, come back, take a lead in a game all of a sudden that they looked like they were going to win. They were 4-2 coming out of the bye, coming off their best performance of the season against the awful Jacksonville Jaguars in London. They were 4-2 coming out of the bye. They would have won on the road at Washington. Keep in mind, Matt Eberflus, had they won that game, that would have been his first road win on a Sunday in his career with the Bears. That is an actual stat. He's never won a road game on a Sunday. All right. Now, the problem with that is most NFL games are on Sundays. It's like Chick-fil-A who's like, man, if you guys love this place, you should really see what we do on a Sunday. Dude, you're not open. So, like, this doesn't help us here. You know what I mean? So I'm watching that game, and I'm seeing them line up for the Hail Mary. And I turn to my wife, and I say, this is the type of game they will lose. Mm-hmm. They're going to complete this pass and they're going to lose. And I swear to God on that. And she was like, oh, you're being so negative. And what happened?
They made it. Yeah.
And then the Packers lost. Like there were no point did I think they were going to win that game, even when they lined up to kick the field goal.
You were at home. I was in the Fox Sports Radio control room and I saw them lining up to kick the field goal. And I do Red Zone Radio there. We got Bo Benson on the producer. We've got Steve Hartman, who's a freak in the main studio. Rich Orenberger, Monsi's there on the updates. And I get on Talkback. I asked everyone, all right, I'm taking bets right now. And I just said, your options are right, left, or short. Bo wanted to say he was going to make it. And I'm like, Bo, this is the Bears trying to kick a field goal to win a game. That's not an option.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, let me tell you, like what being a Bears fan is like. Imagine, like the Bears are the type of team to where if you're a Bears fan, you go into a liquor store and you find out you just won the lotto. And on your way back out to the car, a bird drops a brick out of the sky and hits you before you can go celebrate the winnings. That's what being a Bears fan is like. They will always figure out a way to butcher a game that they should have won. And this season, if you want to go big picture where this all goes back to, everyone's talking about Matt Eberflus. Look, there's a couple of things that are happening. Number one, Matt Eberflus, there's going to be a coaching change at the end of the year, and we can get into that conversation at some point because there's going to be a lot of flirtations and people asking, what about Ben Johnson? What about Ben Johnson, et cetera? So there's going to be a coaching change at the end of the season, and they're going to want somebody that can get the most out of Caleb Williams. Bears fans are now at the point where it's like, oh, the season's over. We know we're going to have a coaching change. We just want to know whether or not Caleb can play. Dude can play. Like, he's coming off his best performance of the season against, this, a Brian Flores defense that everybody raves about, that everybody talks about. Brian Flores, he's all of a sudden going to be a hot coaching candidate. He's going to be a name to look out for. And you go back to some of the previous losses, and it's the same issues anybody had with this team going into the season. They had weapons. Look, DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift, you get him in space, that guy can make plays. He's still got the ability to make plays. You've got DJ Moore, who they just gave the biggest contract in the history of the Bears to. He's a really good wide receiver. Keenan Allen, really good wide receiver, can still play, especially when he's healthy. Cole Kmet's a productive tight end. They went out and drafted Rome Odunze. That's where the problem comes in. They invest everything on the outside. They invest everything on the defense and nothing on the O-line. And it makes me ask the question, and I've thrown out the hypothetical before. If Joe Alt was sitting there at 9, would Ryan Poles have still drafted Rome Odunze? And I swear to God, I think he would have. And the reason why I say that is because Olu Fashanu from Penn State was sitting there. And instead of drafting an O-line opposite of Darnell Wright, to improve the offensive line, they went wide receiver skill position when they didn't really have a quote unquote need for it. And I think that's where the frustration lies, because you see that stuff happen. And then 8-9 weeks into the season, everyone's like, oh my God, they have no line. They're going to get killed. Well, yeah, that was the conversation everyone was having beforehand. The Lions invest in their O-line. Like, you can go first round pick, millions and millions of dollars. The Bears have undrafted players, mid-round picks, one-year deals for guys with bum shoulders that they're giving $3.5 million to. Like, they do not prioritize the offensive line. And what's another aspect of this that's really frustrating for Bears fans, Ryan Poles was an offensive lineman. He played for the Bears. He was part of their offseason. They played it out on Hard Knocks. You would think of anybody. Ryan Poles would be a guy that goes, I know the value in that, and I know that position well. And instead, he's like, no, we'll just go wide receiver here. And then we'll worry about O-line in the middle round of the draft. Okay, dude. Like, so this is why we're at the spot where we're at. It's glaring. It's obvious. Yet it was always obvious this whole time, and nobody made a change about it.
We'll get into you know what, I'll save Matt Eberflus for a second to stick on there, because that does compound the problem with a rookie like Caleb Williams, who the two big things is how's he do improvisationally with the ball, but also, the worry is always, hey, but he also likes to hold on to the ball for a little bit too long. And, unfortunately for the Lions, it is now missing both Alex Anzalone and Aiden Hutchinson. They pick up Zadarius Smith. He's had one sack so far for the Lions, and he's still finding his footing. And I'm just wondering, as they take on some more injuries from the week. Yeah.
Oh, that's what. So you guys think you're going to have an issue getting to the quarterback?
Look, man, lot worse lines have held up so far. I can
do this for you. Why don't you tell Dan Campbell to turn around to the press box and just say, "Hey, Chris, come on down," and send Spillman on a blitz, and he'll get there every single play. Like you have nothing to worry about. Like they will figure out a way. And look,
I don't doubt you. I feel like part of this with Lions, and this is rich coming from Lions fans, because we used to be in the same spot. Hail Marys used to be against the Lions. It feels like a lot of that has changed.
Yeah.
But I'm just like, I got tired of watching the Aaron Rodgers Hail Mary from that Thursday night game. It was disgusting.
The Caleb Williams stuff, like holding on to the football is still an issue. Like, he got better this past game until overtime. They got the ball first in overtime against Minnesota. He held on to it too long, set him up for an awful 3rd and long. And next thing you know, they punted it away and couldn't get a stop on defense. So that is still an issue that he's working through. The other part about Caleb that has been impressive, I think he's gone like close to 200 throws without an INT. And it's not like, if you've seen some of the throws he's making, he's not dinking and dunking. No. Dude is slinging it. Small windows, difficult throws. So all of that is promising, and you feel good about it. But I look at the Lions situation, and the one thing I give credit to Dan Campbell, and the one thing I give credit to the Lions for, they're so the opposite of an NBA team. And here's what I mean by that. They don't play with their food. There's no like, oh, we got a bad team coming up here, and they mail it in. You're like, oh my God, how did the Celtics lose to the Hornets tonight? Or no, the Lions like, oh, that's a bad football team. Let us show you how really bad they are. And they've done that over and over again. So when it comes to this game on a short week, I can't find a path to victory for the Bears, or to even be able to keep it close.
I think Lions fans, to my point, was that I feel like we are almost a little spoiled right now coming off the 50 burger, because I had a lot of questions, and I think people look at the injuries as the one thing to derail the Lions. But I also think that this team's so good, we're just looking for things to critique at this point a little bit. Like that 24-6 was, yes, that was the lowest net total they had. But also I believe their net success rate on offense was the highest for any other team on Sunday last week. So even in a combined 30-point game where the under's hitting, like, they are still making the Colts eat the dirt, not touching the end zone. You mentioned the lack of interceptions, which is something I think is a challenge for the Lions, because I know how this Lions secondary is. Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch want to be they want to be opportunistic with the takeaways, and the Lions have always punished teams on takeaways. Now, they didn't have one, I believe, against the Colts on Sunday, but it's it was a lot of against. I see a lot of comparisons with Anthony Richardson to Caleb Williams. Both can make those kind of throws. I think Caleb's a lot more accurate than Anthony Richardson, but when he could get it deep, he can make him pay. But when it was with the shorter field, that's when it started to become a problem. It became a problem because the Lions don't like anyone running on them. And then as a young rookie quarterback, all you've got is a shorter field to work with and much more active, much more angry safeties to contend with.
I also like one of the big advantages the line. I mean, let's be honest, they're going to have an advantage everywhere. I mean, let's just be honest to call what it is. But one of the things to pay attention to, a loss that doesn't get brought up a lot because I don't think people, unless you're in the weeds or know the team well, you're aware of this. A guy by the name of Andrew Billings, who is with the Bears, the D tackle, interior lineman, very good player, unsung hero, doesn't get any of the shine. He's out for the year, torn pectoral muscle. That was a huge loss. They like their run defense was a little leaky, but they were starting to figure it out. And then when he went down, they've just been scrambling to try and figure all of that out. I wouldn't expect that Jared Goff is going to need to light it up. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown's banged up. Who knows what happens with that. I think this is going to be a steady diet of Gibbs, Montgomery, and they're going to run the ball down their throat. Like I don't – and that's going to be a path to victory because if you've seen the Bears play, they do have the tendency to give up yardage in the run game. Their red zone defense has been well. What another interesting stat about the Bears, this game against Minnesota was the first time all year that they scored first in a game. Okay. So, and the only reason they scored first is because they gave the ball to Aaron Jones and he was stripped at the 1 yard line. He was about to walk in for a touchdown. It would have been every game this year that the Bears opponent would have scored before them to start a game. And instead they stripped it. Bears got the ball back, went down the field. They ended up scoring in a really fun game, but also a game the Bears had no business being in towards the end.
Are you surprised by how just unbelievably tight the NFC North is? Like, besides the Bears, obviously, but I think that's some of the angst for Lions fans too, is that they're looking at the history on Thanksgiving. They're looking at the injuries, and they're also looking at the fact that in spite of still only having one loss, the Vikings are right there, right behind them. And I think that, I'm not saying it leaves Lions fans less confident, but it kind of leaves them anxious at the same time. I know I can never sit still for a Thanksgiving game ever.
Look, I'll tell you this as a Cubs fan. That was 2016.
Yeah.
You're just waiting. Okay, now what's going to happen? And then you get to Game 7 of the World Series after they're down 3-1, and they're leading the game, and Aroldis Chapman gives up the tying home run, and you're like, oh, okay, so this is how this is going to go. Yeah. They're going to tease us all the way to a Game 7 after being down 3-1, and then what they're going to do is they're going to lose and give up the game after having a huge lead on the road there. And then all of a sudden, that didn't happen. Aroldis Chapman came out for the next inning and got out of it. And you're like, whoa, what? And then they go to extras, the rain, all of that, Ben Zobrist, base hit, and they figure out a way to win it. And you're looking around going, wait, so you mean like they didn't screw this up? And that's what I think Lions fans are kind of going through. You're just expecting doom on the other end. And the one thing, this is when I was convinced. Like, doing the show with me on Saturday, nobody has been more complimentary to the Detroit Lions than I have since this build started. I'm happy for them. I don't care that that's an NFC North / former NFC Central foe. I love the fact that the Lions are good because I love their football team. They're the best team in the NFL, and I don't even think it's close, to be honest with you. I look at the Lions and I go, and I'm watching them, and we're getting ready to do the local KNBC show on Sunday night, and I'm watching them against, was it Houston? The game where Jared Goff threw all the interceptions?
Yeah, Houston.
Okay.
So that, I was going to say, there were two of those games that I know what you're talking about. Like, I feel like there's 2-3 games where it feels like they should have dropped it but didn't. That's one of them. And then the Vikings game's the other one.
But it also shows you, because we've seen this being in LA, there are games where Jared Goff will just have a stinker. Like, he will throw 3-4 pick. Like, look, when he was with the Rams, he had one at Soldier Field on Sunday night. What's funny about that game, that was 2018, and Lions fans will remember this. That game on Sunday Night Football was 2018. Bears beat the Rams in a really sloppy offensive game. It was Mitch Trubisky versus Jared Goff. Jared Goff had one of those games. And then following Sunday night, the Bears turned around on Thursday with Chase Daniel at quarterback and beat the Lions on Thanksgiving.
Ugh.
And that was a Matt Patricia game. And I remember saying at the time, that's one of the worst losses I've ever seen. You had a team play Sunday night, not the early noon Central Time slot or 1 Eastern Time. They played Sunday Night Football in cold conditions, lost their starting quarterback, and on a short week went on the road and blew out the Lions on Thanksgiving to start the Thanksgiving slate of games. One of the worst losses I've ever seen that never gets talked about enough. But Jared Goff's capable of that. The fact that he's had those and the roster's so good that it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. He's never played with a roster like this. I don't like the Rams went to a Super Bowl. There's never been a roster that he's been on that's been as good as this. And that's why I look at them and go, that's the best team in football. I don't even think them getting the 1 seed is a prerequisite for them to go to the Super Bowl. As they've shown, they can go on the road. They can get you there. They can get you in the snow. They can get you in the rain, the sun, the dome. It doesn't matter. They're the best team in football, and that's going to play out in the postseason.
I feel like we're recapping a bunch of points we've done through the POD cast this season about all these little things that we've had to check off for the Detroit Lions. Well, they can't play in the elements. Okay, cool. You just housed Green Bay in their own place. Well, they need to come back from down, whatever. Okay, well, that Texans game was nuts. And you'll notice in that Texans game, too, and I've noticed this, everyone talks about Jared Goff as a pocket passer. He started to roll out now. And I don't know if that started at the bye or specifically halftime for the Texans game, but either way, I think he realizes he can't have that pressure coming off. And especially against the Colts on Sunday, there were some big time throws he's making as he's on the run where I'm thinking he's just going to tuck it and kind of slide, pick up what yards he can. And all of a sudden he's dumping it off to Tim Patrick or St. Brown on a comeback route. And I'm just like, I've never seen Goff playing like this before. Ever.
Yeah, no, it's the best football he's played in his career, and he and the Lions are perfect for each other because they were so dismissed and so cast off as, all right, you take him, we don't want him anymore. And you had a lot of Ram fans and LA ball washers out here talking about, yeah, get rid of Jared Goff, he's got to go. And I will contest, I think the Rams would have won a Super Bowl with Jared Goff. I really do. I think he got scapegoated out of town. I think Sean McVay felt guilty about it, as he should have. He won a lot of big games for the organization, took them places they had never gone to in decades. And to see the way his career has been revitalized in Detroit, the way they've wrapped their arms around him, the way they've celebrated him, and the way that organization has turned around, I don't know anybody who's a fan of any other team in the NFC North, and I know all of them. I know Vikings fans, I know Packers fans, I know other Bears fans. Nobody looks at the Lions and says, F that team. I think everybody sort of tips their cap and says, job well done. You guys figured this whole thing out.
I think I've got a few salty Vikings fans who might contend that, but whatever. They don't really matter right now. I do think it is funny on the Goff thing, one last thing, and then I should really want to ask you about Eberflus. That even when, because again, we're both in Los Angeles, and I talk with a lot of these people who have the ear of people in the Rams organization too, and it was always, well, Jared Goff's got to win the big one, or now this is the moment where Jared Goff is going to wilt. He's got the attention on him and he'll wilt. And I'm like, and it feels like an impossible goalpost sometime. He's won 2 playoff games for an organization that hadn't won a playoff game in 30 years. What more do you want from him? That 5 interception game came right back and won it.
Yeah.
I don't know what he needs. It just feels like we'll keep moving the goalposts on this guy forever, just because once upon a time on Hard Knocks, he talked about the sun rising and setting. It kind of feels that way.
It's because people have an opinion and a take.
They have an archetype on a quarterback.
Well, and they just want to hold on to their initial thought of that quarterback instead of like, all right, there's new information that's come in. Let me go ahead and check this out. I would just ask this question. How many quarterbacks are you taking ahead of Jared Goff right now in the NFC?
In
like,
the
if
NFC,
you want to go AFC,
I mean,
Like, you know
even
what I mean?
AFC, maybe we could probably put, like, I mean, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson. It's not
Mahomes,
much.
Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen. I would still say Joe Burrow, even though the team's bad. But the point being, this is a guy whose previous team didn't want him anymore, paid for somebody else to take him, and we're talking about now the best quarterback in the NFC.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so for anybody that wants to just hold on to these preconceived opinions or notions about Jared Goff, you're missing a huge gap in the timeline of a guy who's turned his career around, a career that, by the way, wasn't all that bad before that. Like, he had great moments with the Rams, but
He
people
did.
just pretend like, oh no, this guy sucks. I mean, it's like Russell Wilson. If you look at Russell Wilson's career, he had one down year with Denver. His
Yeah.
final year in Denver, he wasn't bad. Look at the
No,
numbers. Like,
no, he wasn't
uh,
bad.
so it's funny how people hold on to that stuff and refuse to let it go.
I got to ask you about the coaching situation. We mentioned it before. I know, talking with at least one other person who follows the Bears closely, we know Virginia Woolf doesn't like firing coaches in the middle of the season. The Bears have never done that. And yet at the same time, it's kind of all I hear is just this impatience with Matt Eberflus to finally be shown the door. At the same time, you get some reports out that, like, there's going to be that he announces to the press corps on Monday that there's going to be offensive changes, and then that's those same people are hearing from their own coaches like, he didn't tell us anything about that. What offensive changes? He hasn't addressed any of that with us internally. It just feels like a huge mess there right now with what he is, and I know everyone's counting down the days until he's gone. And I guess the question is, knowing a franchise as conservative as the Bears have been with their coaching, I'm curious what happens when it does drop. I'm curious on the kind of money they try to show, who they're even going for. And more than that, I'm curious if Ryan Poles goes with them. And I'm curious what all of this does for the development of Caleb Williams, because I'll tell you from watching Matthew Stafford over the years, the one thing he talked about when he eventually decided he wanted to go to the Rams was he was tired of getting a new offensive coordinator seemingly every year to 2 years, having to relearn everything. It can really mess with your development. I think great quarterbacks can overcome that kind of, chaos, but it certainly doesn't help a young quarterback still adjusting to the NFL.
So one of Eberflus's biggest issues has been able to hire assistants, coordinators. For example, they fired Shane Waldron after 8-9 games this year. They had just hired him. They just hired him because they fired Luke Getsy previous to that. So you're now 0 for 2 on offensive coordinator hires. Thomas Brown has simplified the offense seemingly, and they look more improved and better. But, they scored, 19 points the first game. It's not like they're lighting up the scoreboard. We're not all of a sudden putting up 60 points a game like it's an old Big 12 game. Like
it's kind of painful watching them march down the field.
Yeah, I mean, but like you have seen growth and improvement there, which is nice, and all of that is good and well. Then there's, what happened with their former defensive coordinator. I think his name was Alan Williams, who I guess it's normal standard operating procedure to have the FBI raid your facility, like that's normal because they're worried about maybe what they found on a laptop, but we'll bury that and just not talk about that and pretend like that's no big deal whatsoever. Because, people forget about it. There's just things that have been done and decisions that have been made. And you're looking at it going, so what's the plan? Like there was reports that, every offensive staff has their scripted plays, things like that, where you get your first 15, your 20 scripted plays, right. Whatever. I guess Shane Waldron just didn't have that. That just and finally DJ Moore and some other veterans spoke to him and were like, hey, can we know what we're going to do? So it's oh, well, we didn't have an exact script, but we had an idea what we were going to do. There's stuff that goes on. Eberflus reportedly sits in every single meeting. That's not every offensive meeting, every defense. He's still calling the defensive plays. Some people have asked hey, maybe he should focus on just the task of a head coach and trust other people around him to do that. Because if he did that, maybe he wouldn't challenge an awful challenge against Jordan Addison this past week. Or maybe, he would have his team better prepared for what was happening on the Hail Mary, or maybe there's things that have happened, and he's a good defensive coordinator, and he seems to be a good defensive play caller, but Ryan Poles loved the guy, and that was his choice. I think they move on from Eberflus. And I just to be clear, because I always like to make sure that people are aware of this. I don't call for anybody's job. You know me, Chris. I can't stand that.
It's
it
not
bothers me.
It's not a good instinct.
Yeah. I don't like that. But the reality is the reality. I think they're going to move on from him. Ryan Poles, I think, is safe. He'll get another opportunity to find his head coach, whoever the hell that's going to be. But there has been some speculation that if this game gets out of hand on Thursday, if maybe Friday, they do what they've never done before and fire a coach in season. That's been speculated out there from some people.
I would like to say that, but at the same time, I know the Lions almost earned a bit of a reputation on coach killing. Granted, though, like I know plenty of Jaguars fans was hoping Doug Peterson's head would roll, and he's still stuck around. Like this league is just, it's weird sometimes.
I mean, it is kind of like Doug Peterson and Mike McCarthy are just like, yeah, whatever.
Whatever.
I'm gone anyways. Hey, just pay me. Like, oh, whatever. Yeah. We'll just hang out, Mike McCarthy's cracking jokes. Doug Peterson's having a good time. Yeah, just whatever. We're going to bye a week. We'll figure it out afterwards.
But I guess that's the question. So the new offensive coordinator, I'm sorry, I've forgotten his name already. It's
Thomas Brown.
Thomas Brown. So he's just kind of, the big thing is just simplifying it, right? It just made it easier for Caleb Williams to just play a little more freely.
Yeah, he's not on, 3rd and goal from the 1 when your offense hasn't been able to get into the end zone consistently all year. 3rd and 1 in Washington with the game potentially on the line, giving the ball on a fullback dive to an offensive lineman who's never had a rushing attempt in his career. He hasn't done that. He hasn't called like an option play, like an option play at the goal line against the Colts. Like he did. Like there's just like Shane Waldron had some moments, but like one of the things that players said about him when he left was he was too nice. He wasn't holding people accountable. He wasn't, really getting on players the way he should have. And Thomas Brown will do that. And I think that's been a welcome change and also probably a wake-up call for them. But as much as we sit here and talk about, hey, listen, things are on the up and up with the Bears. There's promise, there's hope. Okay, well, the expectation is they're still going to lose by double digits at Detroit on Thanksgiving. So this will be another loss in a row. And they are fastly approaching a top 10 or greater pick.
Last question here, and then we'll have people know where to get you. But part of that too is I keep looking at DeAndre Swift's lines. We have a fun game we like to play on PODcast, which is taking away the longest run, longest reception, and then seeing what their average is. So DeAndre Swift against the Packers, he was only held to 30 yards by the Vikings, but and this is what the Lions like to do. They don't like anyone running on them. He had a long of 39, and that was one run that accounted for 39 yards of his 71 yards rushing, and I think 13 yards passing. So taking that away, that would be 13 attempts for, and I'm not very good at math, I believe 32 yards.
Yeah,
so
and
they seem to have some trouble getting the ball rolling right now. Even trying to go to Roschon Johnson sometimes, it's just they don't have that ground game.
And by the way, that's an improvement. Early in the year, there was conversations about, man, why is DeAndre Swift, trying to attack to the outside? Why doesn't he run up the middle? Why does it and they started to figure it out, and he has improved. He's great out of the backfield. But the frustration for Bears fans is, okay, you see what he can do on explosive plays. Like he can still take it to the house. Like he still is a threat. Why don't we see more of that? Why is DJ Moore another threat always being thrown to on a screen? Why not get him, downfield? Like we saw what he could do against Justin Fields. There's a reason why you gave him the biggest contract in Bears history. That's the frustration. Roschon Johnson has all of a sudden stepped up as the short yardage goal line back. The same goal line back they probably should have used if they didn't hand the ball off to Doug Kramer, an offensive lineman who's never had a rushing attempt. You know what I mean?
I guess my frustration
that you look at and go, what? Why? Yeah. It's frustrating.
I guess my frustration with Swift goes back to, and it's a quote I remember from Deuce Staley, who was the Lions running backs coach when he was here, and he was like, "You got to learn to take a hit." And I guess my enduring memory always of Swift is watching him step out a couple yards short of needing a first down because he just doesn't want to take that hit to get a couple extra yards. And that was something Deuce would always try to get in him, is like, just, you have to get that extra yardage out there. And it's something I think really improved when the Lions went to their current duo.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, the Bears don't need David Montgomery. No, they're too good for that. They don't need him. They don't need Roquan Smith. They don't need. Yeah. No,
Are you worried about? I hate revenge game. I hate revenge game, but everyone's penciling in David Montgomery revenge game here. I hate the idea of revenge games, but
I think David Montgomery looks at the Bears and what they've been since he's left and is like, nah, they're fine, whatever. Yeah. It's like finding out your ex is homeless. It's like, I mean, what are you gonna do? Like, go take your 10 to go look at your 7X and like, hey, how's the cardboard box? Like, no, he is in such a good spot on a team that's got an opportunity to win a Super Bowl. If I were him, like, on to bigger and better things.
Yeah, they're shooting like apparently promos with like Sonic and Knuckles from the movie and stuff. That's what they're doing.
Good.
But anyway.
And by the way, little shout out to the people's wide receiver, Jameson Williams.
That's
my
right.
kind of guy right there. PEDs and gambling. My type of player right there. You got a friend in me, Jameson.
A master of the gas and master of the parlay, Jonas Knox.
Love him.
And Jonas, God, I almost feel like I'm asking you to tell people where to find you, because I know you are one of the busiest men in LA sports right now. So let's see.
You can just find me on X at the Jonas Knox. It's douchey, but Jonas Knox, I have it, but I can't log into it. It's a real pain in the ass. But there's that, and then I do Two Pros and a Cup of Joe with LeVar Arrington and Brady Quinn weekday mornings 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern time, nationwide on Fox Sports Radio. And then hang out with Chris every Saturday, 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern time, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Pacific time. On Fox Sports Radio, the Jonas Knox Show, and then I'm part of the Challenge, KNBC's post-game coverage of Sunday Night Football locally in LA. So, yeah, it's a lot going on, but, man, it's fun. This is a fun time of year.
You do that challenge with our old friend Rob Parker, too. And I know...
Don't even get me started.
I know. Well, talking about someone who holds the Lions to an impossible standard.
Oh, well, he held me to a standard live on the show after Jared Goff. They came back and won that game against Houston. We were talking about it. He had a real red ass about the game because he hates the Lions. He said, are they going to win a Super Bowl? And I said, yes. And then right when I said it, I was like, what did I just say? So I really, really, for the sake of my arguments with Rob Parker, need the Lions to come through. I think they'll do it again on Thursday, and I think they'll do it again in the postseason this year.
Jonas, you're awesome. I hope this has been some therapy for you and your football team for the time being.
So, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Jonas. And thanks, everyone, tuning in for the Pride Detroit PODcast. Reminder, again, December 4th, that's a Wednesday before the Thursday night game against the Packers. Live show in Detroit. Magic Stick at the Majestic Theater, downtown Detroit. Doors open at 6:30. Show starts at 7 p.m. Eastern. Everyone's going to be there. I'm flying into Detroit the night prior, and we're going to have one hell of a show, and proceeds are going to benefit the University of Michigan Rogel Cancer Research Center as part of our continuing Movember charity. It's a big event for us. It's been over 5 years in the makings. Please come out there. That's Magic Stick on December 4th, Wednesday. All the details on prideofdetroit.com. For myself and for Jonas Knox, thank you for tuning in. We'll see you Starside.